welcome to the world of Japanese Mahjong. I'm Hanayori Uta, and in this comprehensive walkthrough video, it is my intention to get you up to speed on all of the rules you need to know so that you can get started enjoying this wonderful game for yourself. Whether you have a video game or a real-life Mahjong set. Or even if you just think it would be nice to be able to more closely follow what's going on in the Saki anime. Personally, I highly recommend playing it for yourself if you have the chance. But I should tell you, I'm not here to give you a glossed-over pick-up-and-play experience. The rules are myriad and complicated, and tons of different variations on individual rules appear in just about any setting you could imagine. Learning the whole game requires considerable investments of time, concentration, and practice. But if you're willing to learn, playing the game for yourself can be a highly fun and rewarding experience. Now, I do not claim to have the final word on anything you will learn in this video. There are many different ways to translate the Japanese terms used in the game, and not even the Japanese terms themselves are consistent sometimes. Plus, I can only teach you the rules from my own research and experience, which are by no means exhaustive. Nevertheless, it's been a good experience for me, and I want to do my best to share it with all of you. So let's get to it! If you already know of a specific topic you'd like more information about, you can navigate to it using the time links in the video's description on its YouTube watch page. Otherwise, just sit back and take it all in. I'm going to start by introducing you to all of the tiles used in Japanese Mahjong. Knowing how to read the tiles is fundamental to playing the game, and learning how to play becomes more streamlined if you memorize ahead of time what each tile is all about. There are 136 tiles in a standard Japanese Mahjong set, 4 each of 34 different kinds of tiles. The tiles come in 2 basic categories, number tiles and honor tiles. And both of those categories are further subdivided into a variety of suits. A number tile displays a pattern on its face that represents a number between 1 and 9. They are organized into 3 suits based on the distinct style of pattern used. There are 9 tiles in each suit that follow a sequence from 1 to 9, for a total of 27 kinds of number tiles. Knowing how to read the numbers is important because at the very least you need to be able to identify which tiles come one after the other in any suit. The top suit here is called pin in Japanese. In English it is known as circles or dots. These are easy to read. The number of dots on the face is the value of the tile. Next, the middle suit. Its Japanese name is so. In English, it is usually called bamboo. Similar to pin, the so tiles have their values represented by a number of these bamboo stick-looking things. The only exception is the number 1 tile, which is usually represented by a sparrow or other bird of some sort. In more thematic tile sets, it can be a different image altogether. Finally, at the bottom is the tricky suit. In Japanese, it can be called either wan or man. In English, it is commonly called characters. These tiles have their value written on them as a number in Japanese kanji. The number is the top character. The bottom character is the same on each tile. These can be the hardest tiles to read if you don't know any Japanese. 1, 2, and 3 are straightforward enough to pick out because of the number of lines, but the rest you're probably just going to have to memorize. In order to refer to a number tile, you can say the value of the tile followed by its suit, as in 1 pin, 2 so, 3 wan, etc. To refer to multiple tiles of the same suit, you can say each value with the suit at the end, such as 246 won. You can also say the same value more than once to refer to more than one of the same tile, like 222 won, or even 2244 won. Alternatively, you can call the tiles like you would call playing cards in English, such as 1 of dots, 2 of bamboo, or 3 of characters. Each number has a Japanese pronunciation which can be helpful to know as well. Tiles are called in Japanese the same way, number followed by suit. From 1 to 9, the numbers are pronounced I, Dian, San, Su, U, Ro, Chi, Pa, Chu. Now, a couple of special things to note about certain numbers. First, the number 1 and 9 tiles of each suit are called terminal tiles, and there are rules that refer specifically to them. Conversely, you will sometimes hear numbers 2 through 8 referred to as simple tiles. Next, about the number 5 tiles in each suit. Often you will see Mahjong sets where some of these tiles are colored all red. These red tiles are treated like bonus tiles, and they're worth extra points. Otherwise, they function exactly the same. Playing with them is optional. You can use them in a Mahjong set by replacing their normally colored counterparts. Just remember that you should always be playing with 4 tiles of each type. The honor tiles are tiles that bear unique patterns completely separate from the number tiles. There are 7 types of honor tiles, and they are categorized into 2 flavors of their own, wind and dragon, although they are not considered suits in the same way as number tiles. The wind tiles are inscribed with a Japanese kanji for one of the 4 compass directions, and there is 1 type of tile for each direction. In Japanese, they are called ton, nan, sha, pei. In English, east wind, south wind, west wind, and north wind, or just east, south, west, north. Again, if you don't know Japanese, not much you can do here but memorize what each wind looks like. If you're playing a video game, though, this is usually less important, as which wind tiles you really need to pay attention to will most likely be indicated by a display on the screen somewhere. However, there is a standard sequence of winds that you should try to remember, because it shows up in quite a few places in the rules of Japanese Mahjong. The standard wind sequence goes east, south, west, north, wrapping back around to east if applicable. The remaining 3 types of honor tiles are most commonly known as dragon tiles. They're sometimes called the 3 elements, from the Japanese term sangen. They're much easier to read than the wind tiles, since you just have to pick them out by their colors. The white dragon is just a blank white tile, although sometimes you may see a depiction of it with a border around the edge like this. It is called haku in Japanese. The green dragon has a complex-looking kanji on it like this. Its Japanese name is hatsu. Finally, the red dragon is called chun, and it has a simpler kanji that looks like this. So, that's 27 kinds of number tiles, 7 kinds of honor tiles, 4 of each in a set, for a total of 136. Once you know all of the tiles, it's time to start learning the actual rules of Japanese Mahjong. I'm going to quickly go over the basic flow of a game of Mahjong. This is just to give you a general idea, but if you keep it in mind as you're learning the rules, it helps to have a bigger picture to relate each individual rule back to. With that said, a standard game of Japanese Mahjong is played with 4 players in a series of rounds, which are subdivided into individual units called hands. At the beginning of a hand, each player is dealt 13 tiles whose faces they keep secret to themselves, just like a hand of playing cards. Then, the players take it in turns to draw a new tile from a stock of face-down tiles, and then discard a tile from their hands face-up. Which means typically, on your turn, you play with 14 tiles at a time. Your objective in the game is to assemble a set of 14 tiles that qualifies as a winning hand before anyone else does. You can do this not only by drawing new tiles and discarding ones you don't need, but also, under the right conditions, stealing the tiles your opponents discard as well. But beware, your opponents are all trying to do the same thing you are, and they can just as well steal the tiles you discard. Or worse, steal another player's discard before you can steal it for yourself. Once you have built a qualifying hand, you must call it out and reveal it to the other players. The first player to do this wins the hand, and gains points based on the quality of their assembly of tiles, while depending on the circumstances of the win, one or more opposing players will lose points. Afterwards, the tiles are shuffled and the process repeats for the next hand. This continues until a predetermined number of rounds have been played, or possibly until a player has lost too many points. At this time, the game ends, and the player with the most points is declared the winner. Now, let's break down the details of each step in the flow of a game. Before you can actually start playing a game, there are a few steps you need to take to set things up. If you're playing a video game, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff, as the game will take care of it all for you. At any time during a game, each player sitting at the table is assigned one of the 4 winds, east, south, west, or north, called their seat wind. The first step in setting up a Mahjong game is to assign each player a seat at the table and a starting seat wind. Sometimes player seating will be predetermined, particularly if you're playing in a tournament. Sometimes you may not care and the players can sit wherever they like. Otherwise, this is how where each player will sit is traditionally determined. Take one each of the 4 wind tiles and 1 white dragon tile, place them face down, and shuffle them. The players start by sitting at whatever side of the table they like. And then each one draws one of the tiles. The player who draws the white dragon draws 1 more tile. If the white dragon is left behind as the remaining tile, it goes to the last player who drew. Once everyone has a wind tile, it's time for the players to stand up and find their seats. The white dragon remains in its place on the table. The player who drew the east wind comes over and sits here. Then, the remaining players come and sit down in counterclockwise order from the east player following the standard wind sequence. South sits to the east player's right, west sits across from east, and north sits to east's left. Keep in mind, this does not look the same as if you were to look at the 4 directions on a compass. The order is reversed. As it happens, there is also a way to do this step without using the white dragon. Instead of the east player moving to the white dragon spot, east remains in place, or just picks whichever seat she likes, and the other players file in from her the same way, counterclockwise, south, west, north. Now remember, these are not the players' seat winds just yet. All we have done is determine each player's position at the table, and this is where they'll be sitting for the whole game. If this all strikes you as pointlessly complicated, you can choose not to do this step and just let everyone sit wherever. But you should at least have everyone draw a wind tile to facilitate the next step. Once all the players are in their seats, each player needs to be assigned a starting seat wind. To do this, the player who drew the east wind tile during the previous step rolls 2 dice. Whatever number comes up, she counts that many players counterclockwise around the table, starting with herself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next, the player this count lands on will do the same thing again, Roll the dice and count counterclockwise around the table, starting with himself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now, this player is assigned east as her starting seat wind. The remaining seat winds are assigned counterclockwise from east in the standard wind sequence: south, west, north. Again, in the opposite order from the arrangement on a compass. Now, the player who has been assigned the east wind, or the player who is sitting east, as it is also called, has an additional designation. In Japanese, she is called the Oya, which means parent. In English, this is usually translated as dealer. So what you need to do now is find this label-looking thing in your Mahjong set and place it on the table to the right of the dealer, with the side that has the east kanji on it facing up. This is the dealer indicator, and its location on the table lets all the players know which player started the game as the dealer. There is essentially any number of ways to distribute points to all the players at the start of a game, especially in video games where it all depends on the manner of challenge being presented to the player. But if you're just learning how to play, a good way to start is with a standard set of scoring rules, where each player starts with the same amount of points, an amount somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000. Most commonly, the starting amount is 25,000 points for each player. If you have a Mahjong set that comes with point sticks like these, you can use them to keep track of the score. Otherwise, pencil and paper will do just fine. Let me give you a closer look at the point sticks. In Japanese, they are called tenbo. They function in a similar manner to poker chips. Each stick has a pattern of dots on the side that tells you how many points that stick is worth. Different Mahjong sets may have different color schemes for their point sticks, but a stick's value can always be identified by the pattern of dots on it. The sticks with 8 little dots in 2 rows like this are worth 100 points. Sticks that have just one big dot like this are worth 1,000 points. These sticks with 5 dots arranged kind of like the number 5 on a die are worth 5,000 points. And last up are the sticks with a more complex pattern using more dots than any other stick. These are worth 10,000 points. Distributing these point sticks to players at the start of a game is rather like setting up the money in a game of Monopoly or some such. To give each player 25,000 points, they each get 1 10,000 point stick, 2 5,000 point sticks, 4 1,000 point sticks, and 10 100 point sticks. Also like Monopoly money, these sticks will change hands as the game is played, with winning players receiving points from losing players as payment. What distinguishes them from poker chips is that there is very little actual betting involved. For the most part, a winner's payment is the result of a mathematical calculation based on the contents of the winning Mahjong hand that was created. You'll hear more about that later. A hand is the basic unit of gameplay progression in Japanese Mahjong, not to be confused with a player's hand of tiles. And the hands are organized into larger units called rounds. Before you start a game, you must decide how many rounds will be played. There are usually 4 hands played in one round. The player's seat winds rotate by one player after each hand, and a round ends once the seat winds have rotated all the way around the table. Most commonly, games of Japanese Mahjong are played with either 1 round or 2 rounds. And like the seat winds, each round also has a wind assigned to it, which is called the round wind, or prevailing wind. The round wind always starts with east in the first round, making it called the east round. Subsequent rounds follow the standard wind sequence, proceeding to the south round, west round, north round, and if necessary, back to the east round again. The face-up side of the dealer indicator tells you what the prevailing wind is for the current round. It only has East and South printed on it because most Japanese games are normally played only up to the end of the South round. This usually ends up being a pretty good length for a game, but you may choose to play however many rounds you like. Now you're ready to start playing the game. The preceding 4 steps only need to be done once at the beginning of the game, but the following steps will need to occur at the beginning of every hand played. To prepare the tiles for a hand, they must all be placed face down on the table and shuffled vigorously. All 4 players should participate here. Once the tiles have been thoroughly mixed to the satisfaction of all, each player starts picking up random tiles and builds a wall 17 tiles across and 2 tiles high. Always keep the tiles face down so no one can see their values, not even you. 4 players each building a wall of 34 tiles results in all 136 tiles in the set being used up. Once the walls are built, they should all be nudged into place so that they neatly outline a square shape like this. This arrangement of walls will serve as the stock of face-down tiles that players will draw from during the game, and they are collectively referred to as the wall. Now, if you happen to have one of those sweet automatic Mahjong tables, the preparation of the wall will be done for you. Yes, they are a real thing. How awesome is that? Although if you really want one, you should be prepared to sink several hundreds of dollars. A break, that is to say gap, has to be added to the wall to indicate where players will start drawing tiles from, and this is determined by a roll of the dice. Here's how it's done. The dice roll is performed by the dealer, the player sitting east. Whatever number comes up, count that many players around the table counterclockwise, starting with the dealer. 1, 2, 3. Now, the player this count lands on is the player whose wall will be broken. Start from the right-hand end of your wall and count the same number from the dice roll of vertical tile stacks to the left, clockwise. 1, 2, 3. Remember to count by stacks, not by individual tiles. The break in the wall is inserted immediately after the stack this count lands on. Pull the tiles apart like this. Now, starting from the right side of the break, count exactly 7 tile stacks back to the right, counterclockwise. If you reach the end of your wall, continue counting over the next player's wall. After the 7th stack, insert another break like this, so that you have 14 tiles set apart from the rest of the wall. These tiles are not normally drawn by the players during a hand. They are referred to in English, rather famously, as the dead wall. The rest of the tiles are the ones that will be dealt to and drawn by the players. Sometimes I like to call them the live wall to distinguish the two, but they're usually just referred to as the wall. The player whose wall was broken counts 3 tile stacks clockwise from the left-hand end of the dead wall and flips the top tile of the 3rd stack face up. This tile is a Dora indicator, and it marks certain tiles in the game as Dora, or bonus tiles. The 5 rightmost tiles on the top row of the dead wall all have the potential to become Dora indicators over the course of a hand, but only this one is flipped up at first. The others are only unlocked one by one when a special condition is met. I'll talk more about Dora and Dora indicators in a little while. Sometimes you may see this end of the dead wall adjusted so that it looks like this. You may do this yourself, but it's optional. Just don't let it throw you off. Now, the players will take turns drawing tiles from the wall to build their starting hands. The dealer always draws first. Start from the beginning of the wall, which is the end closest to the face-up Dora indicator. Take the first 4 tiles in 2 stacks like this. Keep the tiles face down while you're moving them, and then stand them up facing you like this. The other players will do the same thing, taking turns counterclockwise from the dealer. Going by the player's seat wins, this again follows the standard win sequence of east, south, west, north. Once you get back to the dealer, repeat this process 2 more times, so that everyone draws 12 tiles. Remember, the order the tiles are taken in is clockwise, but the order of the players taking them is counterclockwise. Finally, everyone takes 1 more tile out of 1 more set of 4. The dealer takes the outside top tile, the south seat takes the bottom outside tile, west seat takes the top inside tile, and north takes the bottom inside tile. Now the hand is ready to be played. Each player has been dealt 13 tiles, and there are 14 tiles set aside in the dead wall. That leaves 70 tiles left in the wall for the players to draw. If you prefer, at the part where everyone is drawing their 13th tiles, the dealer can take both the top outside tile and this one, 2 tiles over to the right. The other players take their tiles as normal. This represents the dealer taking the 13th tile for their starting hand and making their first draw of the game simultaneously. In this case, you'd have a starting hand of 14 tiles and do not draw on the first turn. Just a bit of a time-saving gesture. A hand of Mahjong is played in turns. The turn order starts with the dealer and proceeds counterclockwise around the table, wrapping back to the dealer again. On each turn, the turn player draws the next tile from the wall. 1 stack of the wall is used at a time, so one player will take the top tile of the stack, then the next player takes the bottom tile of the stack, and the player after that moves on to the top of the next stack, and so on. After drawing, the turn player chooses 1 tile to discard. It could be a tile from your hand or the tile you just drew. While you are deciding which tile to discard, it is a common practice to place the tile you just drew horizontally on top of your hand. When you discard a tile, place it face up on the table in front of you, on the inside of the wall. This area is called your discard pile, and as you discard on subsequent turns, you want to fill it in with a pattern of 3 rows with 6 tiles each. Fill in 1 row at a time from left to right, and add subsequent rows going from top to bottom. In some cases, you may still have tiles left to discard after filling in the 3rd row. Just tack on all extra discards to the right end of the 3rd row. The event of all 4 players taking 1 turn each is sometimes called a go-around, and each player has their own go-around that starts with themselves. Gameplay continues like this, with players drawing and discarding in turn, until one player declares a winning hand of tiles. At this point the hand ends. A score is calculated for the winning player's hand, and points are exchanged. However, it may also happen that the wall's supply of tiles is exhausted before anyone is able to assemble a winning hand. If a player draws the last tile in the wall before arriving at the dead wall, discards, and still no one declares a winning hand, then the hand ends in a draw. In Mahjong, your goal is to assemble a collection of tiles that qualifies as a winning hand. To accomplish this, there are 2 criteria that your hand must meet. First, it must contain a qualifying combination of tiles. Although there are exceptions, a qualifying combination nominally consists of 4 melds of 3 tiles and 1 pair of tiles, 14 tiles in all. A meld is a group of 3 tiles that can be used together in ways I'll describe next. and a pair is just two copies of the same kind of tile. No single tile can count for more than one meld or a meld and a pair at the same time. They must all be separate from one another. The second criterion of a winning hand is that it must satisfy at least one yaku. A yaku is a rule that describes a general pattern appearing in your combination of tiles, or a specific circumstance under which you finished building your hand. Each yaku has a value associated with it called a han value, and it's these han values that are primarily responsible for determining how many points a winning hand is worth. Every yaku your hand qualifies for contributes its han value to your total, but you must always have at least one. There are a great many different yaku, and learning them all can be a daunting task. But fortunately, you don't need to learn them all right away. I'll discuss at length what all of the yaku are and how your hand can qualify for them later in the video. For now, just focus on memorizing these basic principles of building a complete hand. There are two types of melds you can have in your hand based on which one of two criteria it satisfies. The first type of meld is called a set, which is three tiles of the exact same type. Any type of tile at all can qualify for a set, as long as you have three copies of it. Both the suits of the tiles and their values must be exactly the same. A set of three tiles is referred to specifically as a triplet, or three of a kind. If you happen to have all four copies of a tile in your hand, it is possible to combine them into a quad, or four of a kind, which also counts as a set. However, there are specific rules for doing so, which I'll get to in a bit. The other type of meld you can have is called a sequence, also known as a run or a straight. This is any group of number tiles in the same suit whose values are three consecutive numbers. 1, 2, 3 pin, 6, 7, 8 so, and 3, 4, 5 wan are all examples of possible sequences. Note that you cannot mix and match consecutive number tiles from different suits. All the tiles in a sequence must be of the same suit. Also note that sequences are not allowed to wrap around from number 9 back to number 1, so 891 and 912 are not valid sequences. One more thing, honor tiles can never be used in a sequence, not even the standard win sequence. They may only be used in sets and pairs. Remember, in order to build a complete hand, you need 4 distinct melds and 1 distinct pair. The idea behind drawing and discarding tiles is to try to steer your hand towards this composition. So always keep your ultimate goal in mind as you take your turns. Take a look at the contents of your hand. Do you have 2 consecutive number tiles in the same suit? Hang on to them. They're just 1 tile away from becoming a sequence. Have 2 pairs of different kinds of tiles? Keep both of them handy. Draw 1 more of either tile and you can upgrade one of those pairs into a set. On the other hand, you should also try to keep an eye on what your opponents are discarding. If you see them discard a couple copies of a tile that you yourself only have 1 of, maybe you should discard that tile too, in favor of melds you're more likely to complete. Obviously, luck is a huge factor when it comes to acquiring melds and pairs. There are only so many tiles you'll have a chance to draw, and you can never be sure what you're going to get next. But if you're willing to take some risks, there's a way you can make things easier for yourself, and that's by claiming the tiles your opponents discard for your own. When one of your opponents discards a tile that could be combined with 2 tiles from your hand to form a complete meld, you may steal that tile and add it to your hand. This action is referred to as calling the tile, or making a call, because when doing so you are required to call out in a clear voice. Calling a tile is always optional, but if you choose to make the call, do so quickly before the next player draws from the wall. If the next player happens to be you have a bit more time to decide. Depending on the type of meld you want to complete, there's a different call you have to make. If you have a pair of tiles in your hand and an opponent discards another copy of that tile, you may call out pon to steal the tile and complete the set. This call may be used against any opposing player. If your hand has 2 out of 3 number tiles of any sequence, and the opponent to your left discards the third number, you may call out chi to steal the tile and complete the sequence. It doesn't matter where the discarded tile falls in the sequence, as long as it completes one. For example, if you're holding 1-2 so, you can call chi on the 3 so. If you're holding 1-3 so, you can call chi on the 2 so. If you're holding 2-3 so, you can call chi on the 1 so or the 4 so. Also, if you happen to have multiple partial sequences that could be completed with the discard, you must choose one and only one to complete. Remember, unlike pon, chi may only be called against the opposing player to your left, the player whose turn comes immediately before yours. When you make a call, the current go-around is interrupted and the turn passes to you. Reveal to the other players the tiles whose meld you are completing by laying them face up on the table and place them off to the right side of your hand, vertically. Then, take the tile you called from your opponent's discard pile and lay it face up with the other tiles horizontally. If you called the tile from the player to your left, place it to the left of the other tiles. If you called from the player to your right, place it to the right. If you called from the player across from you, place it in the middle. This is important to do because called tiles are still considered to be part of the discard pile of the player they were called from, and this arrangement lets the players know who discarded each called tile. You are allowed to make multiple calls in the same hand if possible. Subsequent melds may be placed immediately to the left of the previous one, or immediately above it, whichever you prefer, although you should stick to one direction or the other. The melds that you set aside here after calling an opponent's discard are called open melds. After you've set aside your open meld, it is still your turn. You don't draw a new tile from the wall, though, because you just got a new tile from your call. Choose a tile to discard, and then a new go-around will begin starting with the player to your right. However, keep in mind that an open meld becomes a permanent, fixed part of your hand once you've created it, and its tiles may no longer be discarded or rearranged into other melds. The remaining tiles in your hand that are not part of an open meld you are still free to use however you like. To distinguish them, they are referred to as closed or concealed tiles. Similarly, any hand that contains no open melds is referred to as a closed hand, or concealed hand. A hand that has at least one open meld is called an open hand, and calling an opponent's discard for the first time is also known as opening your hand. Remember this bit of terminology, because it'll be important. A quad is a special kind of set that contains 4 copies of a tile instead of 3. In order for a quad to be used as part of a hand, the tiles must always be declared as such with a call and set aside, and there are additional steps that need to be taken afterwards. There are 3 different circumstances under which you may declare a quad, but you must always start by calling out kan, and you always end by following the additional steps which I'll describe in a minute. If you have all 4 copies of one type of tile concealed in your hand on your turn, you may call kan to declare them as a closed quad. There are a few ways you can arrange the tiles in a closed quad. Start by lining up all the tiles side by side and laying them face up on the table. Then, you can either turn the 2 outer tiles or the 2 middle tiles face down. And after that, you can choose whether to keep all the tiles vertical or turn the 2 middle tiles sideways like this. Whichever way you do it is up to you. Again though, try to keep to one way or another to avoid confusion. Either way, set the closed quad tiles aside to your right in the same place where you would put an open meld. But this is important to note. Even though the tiles are revealed to the other players and are in the same location as an open meld, a closed quad is not actually considered to be an open meld, and forming a closed quad does not count as opening your hand. But it does still mean that a closed quad is a permanent part of your hand. Its tiles can't be discarded or rearranged. If you have 3 copies of a tile concealed in your hand and an opponent discards the 4th copy, you may call out Khan before the next player draws to steal the tile and form an open quad. Unlike a closed quad, this is considered an open meld, and the procedure for creating one is the same as for any other open meld. Reveal the 3 tiles from your hand and set them aside vertically. Then place the called tile with them horizontally. If the player to your left discarded the tile, place it at the left end. If it was the player to your right, place it on the right end. If it was the player across from you, again you have a choice. You may place the discard somewhere between the outer tiles, or you may place it above all 3 tiles like this. Also, unlike a closed quad, all the tiles in an open quad are kept face up. If your hand has an open set on which you called pawn previously, and you have the 4th copy of that tile concealed in your hand on your turn, you may call out Khan and add the 4th tile to the open set, forming a late quad. This is sometimes also referred to as completing the quad. Place the 4th tile together with the tiles in the open set, face up, horizontally, and directly above wherever the other horizontal tile in the set is. A late quad still counts as an open meld. Remember that you must be holding the 4th copy of the tile in your hand to add it to your open set. You are not allowed to call the 4th tile if an opponent discards it. No matter which of the 3 kinds of quads you've created, you're always required to perform a couple of actions after setting your tiles aside. First, you must draw an extra tile for your hand from the end of the dead wall. The reason for this is that, for the purpose of completing your hand, a quad is counted as one set just like a triplet. But because it takes up 1 extra tile, if you just continue drawing and discarding normally, you would no longer have enough tiles left in your hand to meet your quota of 4 melds and a pair. This is why you need to supplement your hand with an extra tile. But instead of drawing it from the live wall, you draw it from the dead wall. Supplementary tiles are drawn from this end of the dead wall, the end nearest the first face-up Dora indicator. They are drawn in the same sequence as tiles from the live wall, from the top of the stack to the bottom, and from the outermost stack inward. Remember that the dead wall may sometimes be adjusted so that the first tile is side by side with the second tile. The sequence does not change. You'll notice that there are only 4 tiles in the dead wall before you run into the Dora indicators. This does mean that Khan can only be declared no more than 4 times in one hand. Most of the time, the hand ends in a draw if Khan is declared for a 4th time. Now, one last thing to remember. After you draw a tile from the dead wall, you must take the last tile from the end of the live wall and add it to the other side of the dead wall. The tiles are taken and added in reverse order from how they are drawn. This is to keep the number of tiles in the dead wall consistent so that there are always 14 of them. And for this reason, no player is allowed to declare Khan on the last turn, when there are no tiles left in the live wall. Declaring Khan is the special condition that causes new Dora indicators to be flipped face up. Dora indicators are flipped in sequence counterclockwise from the first one. 1 indicator is flipped face up per quad. However, after you form a quad and draw from the dead wall, there are actually 2 things you still have to do. Reveal a new Dora indicator and discard a tile from your hand to end your turn. and in some rules, the order in which these two things happen is different depending on what type of quad you created when you declared Khan. If you formed a closed quad, you flip the next door indicator first, so that it comes into effect while it's still your turn. If you formed an open quad or a late quad, you discard first, and then flip the next door indicator, meaning it comes into effect after your turn has ended. Other rules let you always flip the door indicator first, no matter what type of quad you created. Earlier, I mentioned that there's a certain risk factor associated with choosing to open your hand with a call. The risk manifests in at least 3 ways. First, it limits the possibilities of what you can do with your hand. Keep in mind that the tiles in an open meld can no longer be discarded or rearranged into other melds. When you create an open meld, you are committing it to be a permanent part of the hand you're building. It's quite possible that later in the hand you'll start drawing tiles that could have made your hand worth more points if those open melds weren't present, but you're stuck with them. Second, it reveals a portion of your hand to the other players. Make too many open melds and your opponents may start to recognize the pattern you're trying to build into your hand, enabling them to more effectively avoid discarding the tiles you need to complete it. Third, it can actually make it more difficult for your hand to qualify as a winning hand. Remember, a winning hand not only requires a correct composition, it also needs to satisfy at least one yaku. And there are some yaku that cannot be fulfilled at all by an open hand, including the most basic ones. If you're not careful about how you make your calls, you may find yourself stuck and unable to form a winning hand at all. That hazard notwithstanding, there are also several more yaku that become worth less points if your hand is open. So you really need to think carefully before making a call, especially if you're still learning all the yaku. If you have an incomplete meld in your hand, try to make this decision ahead of time while it's still your turn, so that you can react quickly to your opponent's discards. Here are just a few more miscellaneous things you'll want to keep in mind about making calls. If you're playing a video game with a Japanese user interface, memorize what the Japanese spelling of each type of call looks like. You'll need to be able to recognize these options when they get presented to you on screen. Some games may also have another written option for declining to make a call when you have the chance. This option typically reads pasu, which just means pass. Sometimes it may happen that one player tries to call pon or kan, while another player tries to call chi on the same tiles simultaneously. In that case, pon or kan always takes precedence over chi. It doesn't matter which player voiced their call first. You are allowed to call a tile even if the open meld you would create with it is already concealed in your hand. For instance, if your hand has 3 white dragons, you may still call pon on the 4th. Or if your hand has 3, 4, 5 wan in it, you may still call chi on a 5 wan. However, most rules do not allow you to immediately discard another copy of a tile you just called. You will need to wait until your next turn. You may not declare kan on the same turn in which you just called pon or chi. You must wait until your next turn. However, you may declare kan multiple times in one turn if it is possible for you to do so, even if you form a different type of quad with each call. You do not need to declare a closed quad or a late quad on the first turn in which you have all the necessary tiles. You may keep the tiles concealed in your hand for as long as you like, and declare kan on any of your turns, as long as it's not a turn you started by calling pon or chi. Finally, if you do happen to call pon instead of kan on the 4th tile of a triplet you already have concealed, either intentionally or perhaps by mistake in a video game, there's no rule that says you cannot use the leftover tile to complete the quad on a later turn. You have not missed your chance. You've seen the Dora indicators in action. I think it's time I told you about Dora. The Dora system adds an extra element of strategy and luck to Japanese Mahjong by randomly making certain types of tiles worth more points if you have copies of them in a winning hand. A Dora indicator causes all copies of the type of tile it indicates to become Dora at all times, regardless of where they are on the table or whether or not they have been drawn yet. The type of tile that is marked as a Dora by the Dora indicator is the tile that is of the same suit as the indicator and the next value in that suit sequence. For number tiles, this is simply the sequence from numbers 1 to 9. The two categories of honor tiles have their own special sequences they adhere to. For wind tiles, the sequence is east, south, west, north. It's the standard wind sequence, which is hopefully proliferous enough that you can remember it, though you also have to remember what each wind tile looks like. For dragon tiles, the sequence is green, red, white, which just happens to be in alphabetical order by color, making it easy to remember. For example, if the Dora indicator is the 7 pin, then all copies of the 8 pin in the game are now Dora. If the indicator is red dragon, then all white dragons in the game are now Dora. Now, unlike the sequences that you build as melds in your hand, the sequences for Dora tiles do wrap around from the end to the beginning. So if the Dora indicator is the last tile in a sequence, the Dora is the first tile in the sequence. When a new Dora indicator is flipped face up after the creation of a quad, the tiles it indicates all become Dora immediately. They are called Kan Dora. It is quite possible for multiple copies of the same Dora indicator to appear. In this case, their effects stack with each other, and the tiles they indicate are treated as multiple Dora. Although unlikely, it is conceivable that a single tile could be counted as up to 4 Dora at once. But that's not all. Remember those all-red number 5 tiles that you can choose to play with? Those are called Red Dora, and their special trait is that they always count as a Dora, no matter what the Dora indicators say at present. And guess what? The Dora indicators stack with their effects too. So in the most improbable of scenarios, a single red 5 tile can count for as many as 5 Dora at once. Dora increase your score by adding to the total Han value of your hand the same way that Yaku do. However, this does not mean that having a Dora in your hand is the same thing as having a Yaku. They are two distinct concepts. So Dora tiles by themselves cannot be used to meet the 1 Yaku requirement of a winning hand. But if you do have a Dora in your hand, you should try to make it a part of your winning hand's composition any way you can. Just 1 Dora is enough to double the score of an otherwise cheap hand, and amassing multiple Dora can cause your score to skyrocket. Forming quads to reveal Kan Dora can be a great way to increase your chances of scoring big. But there is something you need to keep in mind. All players are able to take advantage of Kan Dora, not just the player who declared Kan. And no matter how many Dora you have, they're of no use to your score if you don't win the hand. If you're particularly unlucky, your quads may end up doing little more than increasing the value of an opponent's winning hand. When the tiles in your hand are just 1 tile away from being a qualifying combination, regardless of whether your hand is open or closed, you are said to be in Tenpai. The last type of tile that you need to obtain in order to finish building your hand is called your weight. You are waiting on it. There are many different kinds of weights you can have, but at the broadest level, they fall into 2 categories. If there's only 1 type of tile that can complete your hand, you are in a single weight. Otherwise, if there's more than 1 type of tile that could complete your hand, you are in a multiple weight. Here are a few examples that demonstrate the basic types of weights you can have. This hand has assembled 3 sequences of number tiles and 1 set of honor tiles. There is one tile left over, the 5 so. This hand is in tenpai because if one more 5 so is drawn, the hand will have a pair to go with these 4 melds, and its composition will be complete. So the hand is in a single weight on the 5 so. This type of single weight is called a pair weight. This hand has 3 sets of number tiles and a pair of honor tiles. The last 2 tiles, the 1, 2, 1, are part of an incomplete sequence. The hand is in tenpai with a single weight on the 3 1, because if that tile is drawn, it can be used to complete the sequence of 1, 2, 3, 1, providing the hand with its 4th meld. If you replace the 1, 2, 1 with the 8, 9, 1, you have the same kind of scenario. The hand is in a single weight on the 7 1. This kind of single weight on the innermost tile of a sequence that begins or ends with a terminal tile is referred to as an edge weight. Here's the same hand again, only this time the incomplete sequence is the 3 5 1. This hand is in tenpai with a single weight on the 4 1, which will complete the sequence of 3 4 5 1. A single weight on the middle tile of a sequence is called a closed weight. Here's another hand that's currently in a closed weight on the 7 pin. I'm going to have it draw a 5 pin. This tile doesn't complete the hand, but it can improve the hand's chances of being completed. Notice that the same 7 pin could be used to complete the sequence of 5 6 7 pin. But now, drawing a 4 pin could also complete the sequence by adding it to the other side of the 5 6. If the hand discards the 8 pin here, the hand will be in tenpai with a multiple weight on the 4 pin and the 7 pin. This kind of multiple weight for the tiles on either end of a sequence is known as a two-sided weight, or an open weight. You should always be on the lookout for opportunities to upgrade single weights into multiple weights like this, because they can dramatically improve your chances of completing your hand. Finally, this hand contains 3 sets of number tiles, 1 pair of number tiles, and 1 pair of honor tiles. It is in tenpai with a multiple weight on the 1 pin and the white dragon, because no matter which of those 2 tiles is drawn, 1 pair will become the 4th set, and the other will remain as the pair for the hand. This type of multiple weight can be called a double set weight, or just a set weight. Those are the 5 basic types of weights you can have. However, it's important to note that in some rules, whether or not you are in tenpai is also dependent upon whether you could conceivably draw the tiles you are waiting on. For instance, it's entirely possible to have a hand like this. The hand is in a closed weight on the 4 so, but it has already used up all 4 of the 4 so in a closed quad. In its current form, the hand can never actually be completed, so it is not considered to be in tenpai. It's possible to be in tenpai with more complicated weights that are combinations of the 5 basic types. This can happen if you have several close number tiles of the same suit in your hand, so that there's more than one way they can be arranged into melds or pairs. Take a look at this hand, for example. At first, it might appear to be in an ordinary pair weight with 4 complete melds and 1 tile left over. But the leftover tile also happens to fall in sequence with one of the sequences in the hand. So which 3 tiles are the sequence, and which tile is left over? Well, the beauty of this situation is that it can be whichever one you need. If you draw a 4 so, this can be your pair and this can be your sequence. If you draw the 7 so, this is your pair and this is your sequence. So what this hand has done is combine 2 pair weights, forming a double pair weight. Here's a hand with 2 complete melds, 1 pair, and 5 sequential tiles in the same suit. If you take the middle 3 tiles here to be a 3rd meld, the hand is not in tenpai. But if you take the first 3 tiles as the 3rd meld, The hand has a two-sided weight on the 6-pin and the 9-pin to complete the fourth meld. And if you take the last 3 tiles as the third meld, there's another two-sided weight on the 6-pin and the 3-pin. So this sequence of 5 tiles gives the hand 2 possible two-sided weights that share a common tile. And just like the previous example, these 2 weights coexist simultaneously. They've been combined into a 3-sided weight. These are just a couple examples of the near limitless ways that basic weights can be combined. But if you've amassed a large amount of number tiles in the same suit, it's possible to have even more elaborate weights on 4 or 5 tiles, or maybe even more. And that's good, because the more tiles you're weighting on, the more likely you are to complete your hand. Being able to recognize when you're in tenpai and determine what your weights are is a vital skill in Mahjong, and it takes a great deal of practice. So always keep an open mind, and try to figure out as many different ways that your tiles could be organized into 4 melds and a pair as you can. Video games can be a great way to help you learn this skill, as many of them will display on screen what your weights are when you're in tenpai. Other games will only inform you when you've achieved tenpai, letting you practice figuring out what your weights are yourself.